Let's talk about Joe Biden. He may be a lame duck president, but as the Wall Street Journal warns, he still possesses great power. He is the leader of the free world, and he's using that power to possibly cause a great deal of damage to the US, to make life hard for his successor, Donald Trump. And the Journal's Tevi Troy writes, Joe Biden has only 7 weeks left in office, but is still pushing his agenda. His Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission continue to prevent mergers. His State Department is imposing sanctions on Israeli citizens. He's still nominating judges for lifetime appointments. I think that's the one that's worrying a lot of people. And he has just pardoned his son Hunter for a host of misdeeds. How worried should we be about these last weeks? How much damage could he do?
He does hold the power of the most powerful office in the land until high noon on January 20th, and different presidents have taken different approaches. Many throughout history have used that power to the very last minute, and he is clearly taking that approach. Look, some of them, where he's waving the wand of executive orders, those can be reversed fairly easily, just like they're put in. But others, like judicial appointments, that is a worry, because once appointed, especially if it's a young judge, they're going to be on the bench for 30, 40 years. Things like he's putting in some protections in place for unionized labor with federal employees. That's going to directly make it difficult for Trump's policy agenda around cutting the federal government to come into place. And maybe, the deals that he's doing, sending more and more aid to Ukraine and everything else, just makes the picture messier for Trump, but it's 7 weeks, and I think the countdown clocks are getting louder.
Let's just hope there's no more judicial appointments, because they're there for life. They can have a lasting impact. Now, we talked about this last night. Trump's pick for the Drug Enforcement Administrator, the Sheriff of Hillsborough County, Chad Chronister, he's now withdrawn his name from consideration after his arrest of a Florida pastor for holding services during COVID resurfaced and generated significant backlash amongst Trump supporters. I discussed this with Josh Hammer last night. I said this is Trump's first mistake since winning the election. And I'm glad to see that that mistake has so far resolved himself. I'm sure there will be plenty of other mistakes, but this one was really one that concerned a lot of Trump supporters. And it was suggested by his AG, Pam Bondi.
Which is interesting, because Pam Bondi, of course, replaced the only other person who withdrew. But in Matt Gaetz's case, he withdrew because there were enemies of MAGA on the other side who he thought he wouldn't get over the line, versus this one withdrew because the base was very upset with what he did. And it is interesting, because so DEA is an important drug enforcement agency, and the whole fentanyl crisis, which is aided and abetted by the illegal immigration problem, is a key part, a signature issue of what Trump wants to remedy. So it needs to be a very serious person. And maybe he would have been good at that, maybe not, but just what he did with arresting that pastor is just a bridge too far. And I think once you've done that, there's no coming back.
And it wasn't that one isolated incident. It was other things he did during the COVID era. And then also the softly approach he took to BLM rioters and not enforcing COVID restrictions against them. So, he's got some, I don't know if he could ever remedy the
not with the space
problem. No,
I don't think with the space.
No, there is little forgiving or forgetting when it comes to that sort of area. Before you go, this is now hilarious. Donald Trump has posted this picture on Instagram of him, it's a photoshopped image, obviously, presiding over a rocky mountain range in Canada with the Canadian flag flying proudly following his dinner with Justin Trudeau. Of course, it has since emerged that he suggested perhaps Canada can become the 51st state of the US, and Trudeau could be its governor if they can't handle some tariffs. If they can impose tariffs, but they can't handle tariffs the other way, then perhaps really they're not fit to be a country. That was an interesting discussion.
It certainly was. And you just juxtapose, the might of the U.S. economy and the country next to Canada, which is an ally, very similar heritage and all that, but you can sort of see where the mightiness is. And then just you put the leaders, Trump versus Trudeau, you can also see the balance and might. And it's funny, this actually harkens back to the whole Greenland discussion in the last term, where he was talking about, could we buy Greenland? Could we annex Greenland? In humor, they could afford to do it. We're past an era where people take over countries, but it's a very resource-rich place, and America could do it. And he had photoshopped an image of Trump Tower in Greenland somewhere, and this is sort of a page right out of that playbook.
Absolutely. Kosha Gator, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.